Here bringing us a brand new video, and today we got the archetype analysis of Adamancipator. Oh boy, this is a big one. This deck, oh my god, where do I even begin? Everybody knows what Adamancipator does at this point. You know, this is arguably like one of the biggest decks out there right now, alongside Eldritch, where you just can't escape these archetypes. They are everywhere. People who really like more like OTK slash control, they play Adamancipator. People who just like to, well, make their opponent hate themselves, and are all about that control, play Eldritch. And due to that, it's really hard to talk about these decks and give opinions on them that people don't already have, because, tell people about these decks that they don't already know, because everybody knows about this. Everybody knows what Adamancipator does. But hey, if you don't, this is going to be a video for you. So what the heck are Adamancipators? Adamancipators are a rock synchro archetype where they are all about that rock monster, and they are all about making a bunch of synchros. They have 3 synchros at the moment, but some of the card lore seems to hint at a possible fourth synchro or even more. We don't know yet. So who knows? Maybe for all I know, this archetype analysis could be rendered redundant in a week or two, whenever we get like spoilers for the next set after Rise of the Duelist or whatever the heck it's called. But who knows? Anyways. So, they are all about the synchros. They are rock, which is really cool. There's not a lot of good rock decks out there, so the fact that we have one as good as Adamancipators is really neat. They have a really neat gimmick where the tuners are like excavators. They're like in the card lore, they're going and like excavating out the non-tuners. And they integrate that card lore into the actual game and how the deck plays, where the tuners all have the effect where they can excavate the top like 5 cards of your deck, and then special summon a non-tuner, rock or Adamancipator, depending on the card you're talking about, onto the field. And then you get to put the others back. So they are effectively digging for the non-tuners, and I love it. It's really cool, and then the non-tuners get effects whenever they hit the board, or whenever they are in the graveyard. As I mentioned, this deck is rather control-focused. At least that's how it's designed. You can easily make this into an OTK deck, which is kind of crazy. But, however, it can still also focus on the control aspect. I've seen builds focus on both, so it really comes down to your personal preference and how you want to play the deck. And speaking of, they are able to make rather difficult to get around boards. Like a really good end board for the deck will typically have like 3 or so negates, sometimes even more. So yeah, this deck is one that is definitely one to be careful about when dueling against. So let's start talking about it. First and foremost, we got Adamancipator Researcher. She is a level 2 Earth Rock Tuner effect monster, 100 attack, 2100 defense. Pretty good defense there, not that it's ever going to matter, but hey, that's there. If you control a rock monster except herself, you can spell summon this card from your hand. During your main phase, you can excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you do, special summon 1 excavated level 4 or lower non-tuner rock monster, and then place the others on the bottom of your deck in any order. You can only use each effect of Adamancipator Researcher once per turn. And as I mentioned before, this is really where you get to see how the deck functions. The tuners special summon the non-tuners by digging for them, and that is really cool. They also have a typical theme where one monster will focus on only rocks, while the other will do the exact same thing as that, but also only focus on Adamancipators. So Researcher is like one of the best of the tuners, purely because she's the most generic. She can summon herself if you just have a rock, and then she can summon another rock that's a non-tuner from your deck on her own effect. And it can be any non-tuner rock monster. So you can easily integrate some other archetypes into this, and we'll get to that later. So that makes that very interesting in how that functions. So you definitely want to play 3 of her, because she is like objectively like the best tuner in the deck. And then we get Adamancipator Seeker, who does the exact same thing, but requires Adamancipator monsters on the field in order to special summon himself, and can only summon an Adamancipator from your deck on his own effect, where he excavates. Due to this, he's a bit more restrictive than Researcher. That's why you typically see 3 and 2 or 3 and 3. Typically speaking, though, personally, in my opinion, I should say, I do recommend playing 3 Seeker and 3 Researcher. They are the 2 best. Seeker gets out your dudes that are Adamancipators, and Researcher gets out your dudes that are not Adamancipators. So they really are like mirrors of each other. Then we got the Odd Duck out, in Adamancipator Analyzer. He's a level 4. I presume he's like supposed to be like the boss of the team or something that's researching all this. And he's a Cyber Dragon. If only your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon and discard from your hand. And then he has the exact same effect, but he summons a non-tuner from your deck. And that's basically it. Analyzer doesn't get played as much as Researcher and Seeker, purely because he's only good going second. Otherwise, you gotta normal summon him, and that's not very good. You don't want to have to just rely on normal summoning him. The deck has better normal summons. That being said, though, the fact that he still is capable of just popping off, especially if you do go second, which this deck doesn't tend to do, depending on the build, it can result in some very ridiculous boards, because you can special summon him, get his effects, special summon Researcher, special summon Seeker, get their effects, and that's an easy 5 monsters on board very quick. So really it comes down to what personal build you're playing. If you are playing a more control focused deck that wants to go first, probably not the best thing to play Analyzer at any more than 1 copy. But if you're going second and you're focusing on more OTK focus, then it might be better to go and play 3 of him, because then you can more easily get him on the field right away and be able to get going on your combos, because this can result in just a huge snowball, or I guess I should say rock fall of a turn, which is ridiculous, and it's really, really awesome in how that works. Moving on, we got Adamancipator Crystal Dragite. This is the best of the crystals and is the main one that you're going to see people play, especially in the more competitive builds. It's a level 4 water rock effect monster, 0 attack, 2200 defense. If this card is special summoned by the effect of an Adamancipator card, you can draw 1 card. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target 1 water synchro monster you control or in your graveyard, return it to the extract, and if you do, place this card on top of your deck. You can only use each effect of Dragite once per turn. Dragite is the best just purely because he lets you draw a card on summon, which is really, really good. He can also recycle your water synchro, which is of course the Dragite synchro. So really, really important there. You're going to typically see 2 to 3 copies of this card in the more competitive Adamancipator builds, and is definitely something worth considering playing 3 of. Personally, I would never play less than 3, but I have seen some people play 2. So it really comes down to what you want to do. The big thing is that he lets you draw and recycle your big synchro, and he also recycles himself, which is really cool. Then we start getting into the more questionable cards. First, Adamancipator Crystal Raptite. This does the exact same thing as Adamancipator Crystal Leonite, except Raptite, you see, I guess I should explain first. Raptite on summon, whenever he is summoned by the effect of an Adamancipator, lets you place 1 rock from your hand or graveyard on top of your deck. Leonite does the same thing, except it has to be an Adamancipator. And then Raptite on a graveyard, you can target 1 wind synchro you control or in your graveyard, return it to your extra deck, and if you do, place it on top of your deck. And then Leonite does the exact same thing, except it's only for the fire synchro. So these two are, again, parallels of each other, with Raptite being more generic and Leonite being more exclusive to Adamancipators. Due to this, and how they just aren't as nearly as good as Dragite, you don't see these played very often in the more competitive builds. And if you do see them being played, it's only as a one-of, because they just don't offer enough for the deck to be able to do what it wants to do. Moreover, the synchros for them aren't as nearly as impactful as the synchro for Dragite, so people typically steer away from them in the more competitive builds. Now, that being said, if you want to play them, that's totally fine. I would not recommend any more than 2. But however, you can totally get away with playing only 1, because they are capable of resetting themselves into the deck and also putting their synchros back in the deck as well. So then you can turn them out again and hopefully get some combos going. So there is merit to playing them, especially since their synchros aren't bad. They're just not as good in comparison to what the more competitive builds can do. So it's something that is definitely a bit of a balancing act in what you want to do and everything, and how you want to play the deck. Especially if you're going for the more control build. If you're going for the more control build, Raptite's a bit more appealing, because the Raptite synchro is actually like really good for what he does on field during your opponent's turn. And let's go ahead and get to that. So definitely play either 0 or 1, maybe 2 of these guys, depending on your build that you're going for. Speaking of Rap Type, let's talk about him. Adamancipator Risen Rap Type. Level 6 Wind Synchro Rock Effect Monster. 2200 attack, 2800 defense. 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuners. I love how generic these cards are, by the way. During your main phase, you can excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you do, you can special summon 1 excavated rock in defense position. Also, place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. During your opponent's turn, if a wind monster is in your graveyard, as a quick effect, you can target 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. You can only use each effect of Rap Type once per turn. So, this card alongside Leonite, who we'll get to here in a minute, are very debatable and if they're even worth playing at all. I have seen the competitive builds sometimes play 1 and sometimes not play any at all. Personally, I really like Rap Type, especially, and also Leonite as well. I mean, like, I've seen some builds play 1 of each, and I've seen some builds play none. Personally, I think not playing any is rather silly because they have the exact same effects as their as their tuners in the main deck. Who, like Leonite, again, same thing. During your main phase, you can excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you do, you add 1 Adamancipator card to your hand, and then you place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. During your opponent's turn, if a fire monster is in your graveyard, as a quick effect, you can target a rock in your graveyard, special summon it. You know, use that effect of Adamancipator Rise and Leonite once per turn. He's a fire, rock, super generic, synchro, level 6, 2400, 2200. So these cards here, I can see more of a reason to play Rap Type than there is to play Leonite, because Rap Type lets you summon any rock from your deck just for doing the excavation, and then Leonite lets you search out a Adamancipator card, which is really, really cool, especially since Adamancipators have some really good spells. So they are debatable. Personally, I can totally see why some builds would play only Rap Type and not Leonite, especially since some people don't even bother playing with the little rocks and just focus on making these guys to be able to get more search on. I do personally recommend playing at least 1 of each of these guys because Rap Type can special summon from deck, while Leonite lets you add from deck, which is really good. There's no reason not to play 1. So that's just my opinion, though. I mean, like, I've had very long debates with friends about playing these guys at all. One of my friends is just really adamant about not playing either of these. I don't get it. I mean, I kind of do. There are better options to make while going into your synchro plays and your link plays. But, like, again, they're just so good. Special summoning from deck. Adding from deck. Banishing a card in your opponent's graveyard. Special summoning a dude from your graveyard. I don't get the hate that these synchros get at all. Like, maybe it's just my local area that people don't like these. Am I the only one who's seeing that? I don't get it. Moving on, we got Adamancipator Risen Dragite. Dragite is the objective best of the synchros. He's a level 8, 3k attack, 2200 defense. Super generic, only needing a tuner and a non-tuner. 1+ non-tuners. During your main phase, you can excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you do, you can return cards your opponent controls to the hand up to the number of excavated rock monsters, and then place the rest, the excavated cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. When your opponent activates a spell trap card or effect, while water monster is in your graveyard, as a quick effect, you can negate that activation, and if you do, destroy it. So, Dragite is a really good synchro. He has a once per turn negate, and then he can also bounce a lot of stuff back to the hand. And that can be very devastating for a lot of decks, because then they have to go through the tediousness of resummoning their monsters or resetting their back row, anything like that. So Dragite is a really just all-around excellent boss monster for the deck, and is something that you definitely want to play at least 1 of. I've seen some builds play 2 of him because he's just that good, and it kind of sucks whenever he gets killed. So definitely consider playing at least 1, sometimes maybe even 2 depending on your build, but this thing is really good regardless of what you're playing, whether it's the control build or the OTK build. Moving on to the spells, we got Adamancipator Laputype. It's a field spell. All rocks you control gain 500 attack and defense. Once per turn in your main phase, you can stack your deck for any 5 Adamancipator cards from your deck and place them on top of your deck in any order. This is a really nice card for the Archetype. I've seen people play anywhere between none of it and 2 of it, and it's really because again, it's another one of those things where people are arguing about whether it's worth it, because does it really do anything? Not really on its own. It doesn't technically do anything on its own. You need to have a tuner in order to be able to make full use of it. But, however, whenever you do make full use of it, my god, is it an amazing effect. Because you are able to get exactly what you want. You want to get your Dragite Crystal, just put it on top of your deck, and then summon your Researcher, your Analyzer, your Seeker, whichever one it happens to be, and then get your non-tuner out. And then you're able to just plus like crazy off from there. So it really comes down to your personal preference and what your goal is for the deck. If you're going for the control build, it's much better in that one, I feel, just because you are able to make full use of its effect multiple times. And as for the OTK build, you might only need that one, so maybe consider playing one of it just for the off chance that you do get to trigger it. It really comes down to what you're wanting to do with your deck, though. So, me personally, in the pure build, I love playing 2 of it, just to be able to stack my deck as much as possible to be able to get them out. But, however, for the more competitive builds, I can totally see why some people would play only 1 or none of it. Moving on, we got a card that you're definitely going to be playing 3 of. Adamancipator Signs. It's a normal spell card. Target a rock in your graveyard. Special summon it in defense position. And then, if you special summon an Adamancipator monster by this effect, you can take 1 level 4 or lower rock monster from your deck and place it on top of your deck. This card is amazing. You summon any rock monster from your graveyard. It's just flat out monster born for any rock. And then, if you summon an Adamancipator, you get to put a dude on top of your deck. That on its own is really good. But on top of that, there's no once per turn clause on this card. I'm not seeing it. There is none. So if you theoretically open multiple of these, or you get to add another like off of Leonite or something, you can plus like crazy off of this card. Because think about it. You summon any rock from your graveyard. You summon, I don't know, Leonite, okay? Activate, and then you put a dude on top of your deck. Adamancipator Leonite effect. Excavate my top 5 cards. Get my Researcher. Researcher effect, special summon her. Her effect. Excavate 5 cards. Summon another dude. Let's say it's Dragite. Dragite effect, draw a card. Oh, hey, I drew another Signs. And then you sync for good old Dragite. Dragite effect, bounce something. And then it can just steamroll from there. It is amazing. This card is awesome for the deck. Definitely play 3. I don't see why you wouldn't play less than 3. Play 3. Moving on, we got the card coming out in the next set, Adamancipator Friends. This is an interesting one, and is a card that a lot of people, again, are debating on. It's really hard to talk about because, again, this is a big, like, meta-relevant deck, and people are constantly arguing over which cards are worth playing or not. So, Adamancipator Friends. It's a normal spell card. Excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of rock monsters you control plus 5. Theoretically, that means that if you have 6 rock monsters out, 5 in the main monster zone, 1 in the extra monster zone, you can excavate 11 cards. 12, theoretically, if you have an extra link, but, like, without that, that's never going to happen. Anyways, so you excavate up to 11 cards, 5 cards. Typically speaking, it's going to be like 7 or 8 cards. And if you do, you can add 1 excavated rock monster to your hand whose level is less than or equal to the number of excavated cards. Also place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot spell summon monsters except rock monsters. So, this card is, typically speaking, going to be one of the last cards you play in your combo if you're going for the non-pure build. And by that, I mean the more competitive build that summons like Crystal Wing, Apollousa, Saruja, all that fun stuff, because this locks you into rocks for the rest of the turn, okay? So that means that, typically speaking, after this, you are going to be wanting to make your Adamancipator Dragite, your Block Dragon, all that stuff. That being said, that's ideal situation. That's the ideal situation. If you, for some reason, have to activate this card much earlier to be able to get its effect off, you're going to be locked into rocks a lot earlier than you want to be, and then you're not going to be able to make that Crystal Wing, that Apollousa, that Saryuja, that Borreload Savage Dragon, etc., etc. So, due to that, this card, there's a lot of debate on if it's even worth playing. If you're playing the pure build that's focusing more on just the control aspect and summoning out a bunch of rocks and all that fun stuff, it's a definite 3 of. But however, if you're playing the more competitive build that is, you know, all about summoning a crap ton of stuff that is basically, let's be honest, it's basically DDD but better, in terms of the idea of just summoning out all these really big synchros and everything that can negate a lot of stuff. So, if you're playing that build, it's something that's more like, do I really want to play this? And I mean, the deck can't make full use of other draw cards like Desires or Extravagance. You can theoretically get away with Desires if you really want to, but you're pushing it. You need your stuff in the deck, so this is a toughie. Like, if you are playing that competitive build, it's maybe a 1 of, maybe a 2 of. But it's also a strong contender for not even considering. So it really comes down to your preference and what you want to do with the deck, and if you feel it's worth running with the risk of having to activate it sooner than you want. Now, that being said, this is a great effect. You get to add any excavated rock monster. If you have 3 rocks on the field and you activate this card and you excavate Block Dragon, you're going to get to add it to your hand. That's awesome. Getting Block Dragon to your hand that easily is amazing. Of course, also, if you just activate it without having anybody on the field, you can theoretically add any of the Adamancipator main deck monsters, or most of the other rock monsters that you might play, depending on what other engines you integrate into the deck. So, due to that, this card is a big 50-50. If you don't really particularly care about being locked into only rocks, definite 3 of. If otherwise, it's something to consider playing 1 or 2, if at all. So, moving on. We got Adamancipator Relief. This is an interesting trap card. Tribute any number of Adamancipator monsters, then target cards on the field equal to that number +1. Destroy them. This card is not particularly great. Now, I get what they were going for. Again, this is supposed to be a control build, and if you look at a control archetype. If you look at just Adamancipators, you're going to have a lot of extra Adamancipators on the field that you don't really particularly care about. So if you set Relief, you tribute them off, you can pop like 3-4 cards very easily. That being said, this isn't particularly great, okay? I really wish it was just rocks for one thing. If it was, this would be a really neat little like Icarus attack for rocks. You know, get to pop 2 cards for tributing 1 dude. That'd be nice. But, however, it's counterintuitive to what the deck wants to do, and oftentimes with Adamancipators, especially the more competitive builds, you'd much rather have anything else. So, and heck, honestly, by the time that you get to by the time you get to the end of your turn in the more competitive builds of Adamancipators, the only Adamancipator you have on the field is Dragite, and you'd much rather have him on the field. So, this card is very iffy, if even worth considering at all. I don't personally recommend it. It's not good. I really wish there was just any generic rock that you could tribute to do it, but I guess we can't give rocks an Icarus attack. Moving on, we got Adamancipator Resonance. It's a counter trap card. When a monster effect is activated while you control an Adamancipator Synchro monster, negate that activation, and if you do, destroy it. It's kind of like an Infernity Barrier for Adamancipators, but you gotta have a Adamancipator Synchro out, and while it's really good and it pairs really well with Dragite, because Dragite will be able to negate spells and traps, and Resonance will be able to negate monster effects, and heck, just like most of the other Adamancipator spells and traps, it's not once per turn. So if you have multiple out on the field, you can theoretically negate multiple monsters, but again, that doesn't happen very often, if ever. I've tested out builds that play 3, and I never see them. And if I do, I actually kind of dread it because I want to be able to get out my other stuff a lot easier. And it's oftentimes would have been a much better card. Like if it was any other card in the game, like a Friends or heck, anything else, like an Effect Filler, it would have been better. So this card is another big toss-up. Do you want to play it? It's down to you. But, however, personally, I don't recommend it. There's better options in the metagame, especially if you're playing the competitive build. You have stuff like Effect Failure and Infinite Impermanence, which is probably like the best alternative to it. and so many others, it's honestly not really worth considering. So, overall, I can see why this deck is very, very, very competitive. This deck is capable of churning out huge boards, making very annoying mass board negates. It's able to OTK very consistently, and it's able to get to its stuff incredibly well. It's able to fight through hand traps exceptionally well as well. And due to all that, with how fast and consistent it is, and how resilient to hand traps it is, this deck, it makes sense why it's so popular and why people love it so much for being a meta deck. And it is able to make full use of the outside support that it has access to, with the most notable one being Block Dragon. This card makes the deck obscenely powerful thanks to its effects, where it just lets you search out your dudes, and then of course also if you need to, you can summon it and sit on it, and it protects your other guards. It's really obnoxious. The deck also pairs really well with fossils and magnets. I've seen a few magnet builds that were very interesting. It makes magnets a lot better. I'm talking about magnet warriors like Valkyrion and all that fun stuff. And then you got fossils, which are coming out later, and fossil Adamancipators makes for a really interesting combination, because the fossils are capable of fusing with your opponent's graveyard and your graveyard, and really once your Adamancipators get in the graveyard, other than using them for Block Dragon material, you don't care about them in there. So thanks to fossils, you're able to get more OTK power, and it just results in some really stupid stuff as well. So overall, this is one of the best decks out there in terms of like being just a tier 1. Like, I definitely think it's tier 1, maybe high tier 2. I'm sure that's another debate that people have with me. But this is one of those like really good rock solid decks that people are going to want to consider playing in tournament and everything, if we ever are allowed to go to tournaments again. So what do you guys think about Adamancipators? Personally, I love playing this deck. I'm never going to get to play IRL though, because it's ridiculously expensive just for the core, and I'm not even talking about the outside stuff like getting the Apollousas, Savage Dragons, and yada yada yada. So, what do you guys think? Thank you for watching. Rate, comment, and subscribe, please. And please do consider being a channel member. It's only $1 a month and goes a long way to helping me out. Thank you all for watching. Peace out and goodbye. Thank you all for watching the video. Have a great day. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. Rate, comment, and subscribe. And see y'all later.